Okay, all right. So everyone can hear me and see the slideshow presentation. Okay, good. So Kevin Ritchie, co-chair of the Subawards Subcommittee. I'll be presenting with our co-leads from the templates working group, Beth Kingsley and Carrie Chesbro, who you'll be hearing from shortly. And then Stephanie Scott from the Communications Committee will be joining us to talk a little bit about the website. Please try and stay on mute. But because this is a meeting, we will have the opportunity for people to unmute and speak if they need to, but use the chat function if you have any questions, and we'll try and pause throughout. Okay, so I'm going to provide some general updates and reminders about the work and status of the Subawards Subcommittee. Then again, like I said, we'll hear from Beth and Carrie and from Stephanie Scott. As we, always planning for future meetings, we continue to think about the best structure and format for both virtual and in-person meetings. We had a great session in May, jointly in person with Expanded Clearinghouse. It was surprisingly engaging for how many people were in the room. There were a lot of people in that room, so much so that we could not break into specific discussion groups like I had originally envisioned. But many of you at this point have attended several in-person and virtual sessions, so I'd like to hear from you, not necessarily now, but let me know if you have any strong opinions either way about should these sessions, virtual and in-person, be structured differently? Are you looking to get something different out of each of those sessions if you show up in person versus attending a virtual session? My opinion is more leaning towards breakout sessions for specific topics in person. That was impossible at the May session. There wasn't enough space available and not enough planning in advance. But I think that would be the most productive use of our in-person time, whereas the virtual presentation is a little bit more of a webinar style presentation with a monitoring Q&A in the chat and whatnot. But let me know if you have a strong opinion either way. And then it was great to work with Expanded Clearinghouse jointly over our last several sessions. We're definitely open to more joint sessions in the future, especially since our audiences overlap and there are many topics of equal interest to both groups. So that will be a consideration and a possibility in the future of presenting again jointly with Expanded Clearinghouse. But at the very least, if we don't present jointly, we will avoid scheduling our sessions at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to start today with a few topics that are primarily moving away from the Subawards Subcommittee. Some of this we covered in May, and some of it is relatively new. These topics are not going away completely because we're still going to actively collaborate and participate in these efforts. But there are a few items that are going to be managed by other subcommittees going forward. So we have our NSAP pilot, the non-single audit entity profile pilot, that's still being led by Tyra and Walker, but under the Expanded Clearinghouse Subcommittee. With this move, we're hoping to leverage some of the Expanded Clearinghouse's existing expertise and experience in gathering institutional information, publishing profiles, and managing the rollout of a profile-related pilot. And just want to thank Robert Prentice, Jennifer Rodas, and Amanda Haymaker for their support, and to Tyra and Walker for their ongoing dedication to this pilot. Very excited about the rollout and seeing what we can do to improve how we use non-single audit entity profiles to support our risk assessments. Regarding subrecipient monitoring efforts and questions in general, we'll remain in touch with Expanded Clearinghouse about all things subrecipient monitoring. We do field a lot of subrecipient monitoring questions in the FDP Subawards inbox, and we do host a lot of subrecipient monitoring tools on the FDP Subawards website. So we'll be part of those general subrecipient monitoring questions going forward. And if you have subrecipient monitoring questions, you can reach out to the Subawards inbox as well. We also talked at the May meeting about 3 other topics: FFRDCs, OTAs, and state law. With FFRDCs and OTAs, we determined that subawards are not the primary focus of those discussions. So most of that work will be led by the contract subcommittee going forward, but we'll still collaborate and provide input from a subawards perspective. And we're happy to field any questions you have about OTAs and subawards. People had asked if we could come up with an OTA sample for subawards under OTAs. Not sure if we can get to something like that. We looked at it, but really the best advice we have right now is to start with the subcontract sample and adjust as needed. There's maybe too much variation in OTA funding mechanisms to come up with something better than the existing subcontract sample. The contract subcommittee also has a state requirements working group, and we'll contribute to those conversations as well per our FAQs and guidance. Though, as a reminder, the additional terms box in attachment 2 does permit to add state law, but the caveats are if it's truly mandated, if these state laws are truly mandated and applicable to the subrecipient, that is applicable to the subrecipient as a subrecipient under federal assistance agreements and not as a contractor of another type or a vendor or as a subcontractor under non-federal funds. So, you know, it's there for you to add if mandated and if truly mandated and truly applicable to the subrecipient. And the final caveat is including any state laws can't conflict with existing federal law or federal requirements. Okay, so this brings us to our current active projects in the Subawards Subcommittee, and we're focusing on 2 or 3 things that I feel are of particular importance, and that is finally establishing the Standing Subawards Subcommittee that has been in the works for some time now, and updating the templates and associated guidance, and this is an effort that has been active and in progress all year long. And we're also moving everything to the new website, which we'll hear more about later. So those are the priorities of the Subawards Subcommittee right now. Just a few comments on this Standing Subawards Subcommittee, which I presented on in the past. But we were looking for a broader group of volunteers, roughly 20 or so people that represent all interests and all types of FDP member institutions, to serve roughly a 2-year term and attend quarterly meetings to provide counsel and guidance and provide their thoughtful opinions on different matters that come up in the subawards world. This is to get just a few more people than just a couple of co-chairs thinking about some of these issues, and to make sure that we're addressing any blind spots that might be out there. So we're finally ready to get this started. Maybe do a little bit more targeted outreach to get a couple more institutions, but we have very good representation so far. And again, the Standing Subcommittee is supposed to help us determine consensus. We do a lot of things at FDP to gather data and determine consensus. We conduct comprehensive surveys, we poll virtual audiences, we field comments from individuals in our inbox, and we monitor conversations on the Subawards listserv. We're still going to do all of those things, but we do plan to rely on the subcommittee volunteers here to, again, provide their thoughtful suggestions and opinions in good faith to help us make decisions and to help us collectively drive subaward-related work at FDP. So I'm grateful to those who have volunteered. I have maybe 1 or 2 more confirmations to go before we send out the first meeting invitation and get that quarterly process started. I'm hoping the group can also help us get a little bit closer to yes and no answers on some of the more challenging questions that come up, and rather than continuing to operate in some gray areas. But there will always be some gray area, and the FDP can't really enforce or mandate what institutions do at the end of the day, but the subcommittee can just help make things more clear and concise for everyone. And we'll also, in the interest of transparency, push quarterly updates to the subawards community on the listserv based on the discussions we have at these quarterly meetings. So we'll let you know who's on the subcommittee, and we'll let you know what we're talking about, and we'll share all that information. And that might even give you more information before you go into these annual FDP meetings as a member. And we'll, I'm looking at the list of names right now, and we'll post them a little bit later. Okay, regarding our active working groups, we have the templates working group, which is, actively in progress and full, unless you know Adobe PDF programming. So we were hoping to put out a call to see if anyone out there can help us with Adobe PDF programming, because the working group is at the point where they're going to start translating their work and their ideas into the documents and forms themselves. And we don't have quite the resident expertise that we need. And so we're searching for maybe a little bit of help in that area. So if you have experience with Adobe PDF programming and would like to help out and maybe look at what we're trying to do with the templates in the next couple months, reach out to me, Beth, or Carrie, if you want to offer your expertise or services. And then the FAQ and guidance work will follow the subaward templates work. All right, our third bullet point here, not to bury the lead about volunteering here in the Subawards Subcommittee, but I'm trying to replace our two previous co-chairs, Alice Ruther and Carrie Chesbro, who were wonderful. It was great to work with both of them. I appreciate the hard work that they put into the subcommittee. But I'll be putting out a call for two new co-chairs shortly. The subcommittee definitely needs multiple co-chairs, not only from a balance perspective, but to keep up with the inquiries that we get in the inbox, and to continue to provide support to our working groups and manage our documents and facilitate discussions and mediate disputes between members related to subawards. So I apologize for any delays over the last couple of months. I've been a bit shorthanded, but we're hoping that some of you are interested in coming on as a co-chair, and I look forward to hearing from anyone who may be interested. And just a quick reminder, subawards experience is nice, but is not truly necessary, because the co-chairs do more workflow management, and we're looking for some organizational skills, mediation skills. So sometimes a neutral perspective is actually very helpful. So if you don't have a ton of subawards experience, don't let that deter you if being a co-chair is something that you're interested in. And this volunteer opportunity is a heavier lift than just serving on the standing subcommittee, for example. Okay, so what are the next steps for the Subawards Subcommittee? The first bullet point here relates to just ongoing support to people that ask us for what is the FDP's position on this. They ask us for the FDP position on certain topics and questions. They ask us for clarification. Like I said at the May meeting, I know not all of you were there, but at the May meeting, I said that the Subawards Subcommittee doesn't really enforce or provide a all caps like FDP official position. We more so seek to clarify and support and get people to consider different things and refer to the guidance that we have published and make suggestions and monitor trends and all that nice stuff. And we support FDP members both as pass-through entities and as subrecipients, so on both sides of the subaward negotiation. But an idea I'm pursuing is to better explain what FDP is and what the expectations are by specifically referencing the MOU, the FDP operating guidelines, and our published resources, maybe in the form of a one-page info sheet with hyperlinks to all the appropriate resources. and concise definitions and explanations as to what this whole thing is. Some members have indicated that this information is very helpful to have for both internal and external discussions. So rather than providing it individually as people reach out, maybe we can standardize this information and post it as a resource for all. And so it's packaged and readily available. And we did have a recent example where someone reached out to us, both the Subawards Subcommittee, but to everyone in the Subawards Subcommittee, everyone in the Subawards community via the listserv. And we heard back that it was very helpful to receive not only information from the co-chairs, but to receive different points of view from the Subawards community. So both the subcommittee and the listserv provided valuable information to this particular person that was trying to just build a case. And this was for an internal conversation. So some of us are at large institutions, different offices. There's varying awareness of what FDP is, even within your own institution. So we want to try and help support our members, even as they navigate their own institutions or conversations with auditors. And we heard back that having these responses in hand absolutely gave me and my VPR the confidence that we are running a top-notch subrecipient monitoring program, which is great to hear. So we want to provide support that at the end of the day really helps FDP members with their work. Okay. The second bullet point, need to work more closely with the Data Stewardship Subcommittee on the NIH data management and sharing plans in attachment 7. As the year goes on, may possibly revise attachment 7 to address data management and sharing directly in attachment 7 or add some additional terms. Our templates working group has this on their radar. They have a placeholder for this, and they have some interim guidance on a later slide. So you'll hear more about that. But to this point, most of the work on data management and sharing and the FDP and NIH data management and sharing pilot are focused on developing the plans and budgeting for them. But we do need to start taking steps. I do need to start taking steps working with data stewardship to address some of the subaward related concerns when it comes to this topic. The third bullet point here is one that I added just yesterday after some of the sessions that we saw yesterday. So I hope everyone got a chance to watch the presentation on AI. Ashley had used Microsoft Power Automate to demonstrate some training AI models using a method called supervised learning. And in that demonstration, used AI to read forms and pull data using Microsoft Flow to inform future analysis. It was a great demonstration, but one of the questions, there were two questions in that session that I thought were very interesting, and I wanted to reiterate now. And one is, could AI be leveraged on the FDP templates in the other direction? That is are there any AI tools out there that we could use to fill our PDF templates and samples? And this is a topic that predates the last year of increasing interest when it comes to artificial intelligence. Going back to our subaward delays survey several years ago, a lot of people have been continually asking, is there anything we can do to automate this process? Is there anything we can do to automate how we populate our FDP templates with data from our awards or from our systems of record? The response we got from Ashley was that due to certain coding complications that are over my head and exceed my understanding, it's a little bit trickier. It's easier to train an AI model on forms with data and pull that than it is to populate forms. Again, populating a PDF form is different than using generative AI to write a letter. So we also saw demonstrations on how helpful generative AI could be to write a letter using certain parameters, but filling in a form is a little bit more complicated than that. There was also a question in the chat about, does everyone have to do this on their own, or could the FDP Subawards Subcommittee do something to help everyone? And I thought that was a great question, a very valid point. There are some limitations that Ashley mentioned, that you can only share models within your organization. I think it has to do with within your own enterprise environment. It may have to do with like licenses with certain software programs or access concerns, but that doesn't mean that we can't come up with examples and demonstrate them at our subaward sessions and maybe encourage others to adopt them or give people ideas to take and run with at their home institution. I think it would be helpful, and I'd like to hear anyone's thoughts on this, either now or after the meeting, but probably keep AI and subawards as a standing agenda item at these meetings, maybe establish a working group. If we establish a working group, we'd probably be looking for interested and skilled volunteers, ideally people that are already using this technology on a regular basis at their home institution and in their daily jobs. I feel like maybe a working group on AI and subawards is not the best place to learn this technology, and rather we'd be seeking interested and skilled volunteers that could take a project and start running with it and then come back and show the rest of the community at these meetings what they learned or what they were able to accomplish. It was very interesting to hear that Ashley, Dan, and Robert yesterday were very encouraging and optimistic about everyone's ability to learn this technology, but they did clearly say that you have to make time for this and you have to be thoughtful about learning this technology. So I'm interested to see where we can go, but feel free to, any thoughts or comments, if anyone wants to speak up about AI and subawards or drop something in the chat for consideration at the end of this meeting. It just seems like an inevitable agenda item or working group going forward. Okay, I think I have 2 more slides before I turn it over to Carrie and Beth to talk about templates. I wanted to advertise this NIH webinar on subawards that's coming up in October. This is not an FDP webinar. This is an NIH webinar, but I assume that it would be of great interest to everyone listening to this conversation today. So if you have not already seen this being advertised through NIH channels and their newsletters and blogs, when we distribute these slides after the meeting, you should be able to register via this hyperlink or take a quick look now and search for the NIH webinar and subawards coming up in October. Okay. Here we go. You knew this was coming. None of this information is new as of right now, but let's just recap. We have to talk about this. Let's recap what we learned over the last week. Or I'm going to try and recap what we learned over the last week. We learned that there was an updated notice, the NIH final updated policy guidance, which when the original 133 was released in May, there were 1 million questions. And what we were saying at FDP, or at least on the Subawards Subcommittee, is like, let's wait for the updated final guidance. And so now we have it. And we have some additional comments that NIH made in response to questions that came up during the federal agency updates yesterday and the foreign interest working group as well. Back in May, Dr. Lauer mentioned during his presentation that the policy change is about oversight and not about research security. And then in response to questions at the foreign influence working group yesterday, Michelle Bowles pointed out that NIH in this policy change is addressing a specific audit. And there were questions about whether or not this has to do with countries of concern or high-risk subrecipients. And it does not, because the audit itself did not address that. So the audit itself, and therefore the NIH policy, is applicable to all foreign subs and is not limited to high-risk foreign subrecipients or subrecipients located in a country of concern. And I think Michelle made that very clear, and it's written very clearly in the policy that it's not limited. So everyone should be aware of that. And then the two parts that I've put in bold have drawn the most amount of attention because they represent changes from 133 to 182, and that's access to copies of lab notebooks, data, and supporting documentation. And the frequency was changed to no less than once per year to align with progress reports. The effective date is in January of 2024, and there's a 60-day window to get in compliance. And it was clarified that to get in compliance means updating all existing foreign subaward agreements to include this policy change. We're waiting to hear maybe a little bit more clarification on what is the deal with extensions to the 60-day window to get in compliance, because I'm sure it's going to take more than just slapping terms and conditions into a subaward amendment. This is something that is something that's going to require working directly and closely with your subrecipient organizations to accomplish, to make sure that they're aware and that they understand what's happening here. But from what I gather, from what I understand, is that the FAQs that are currently posted will be updated or enhanced based on feedback that NIH is receiving to include some of the questions that were asked during the sessions yesterday. There was another question. Do our templates meet the updated requirements in 15.2 of the grants policy statement? And the answer is yes, because the general terms and conditions in attachment 2 incorporates the whole NIH grants policy statement, saying that by signing this subaward, the subrecipient agrees to the federal awarding agency's grants policy guidance, including any addenda in effect as of the beginning date of this period of performance or as amended. So the whole GPS is already there. So yes, the templates are already in compliance. But the big caveat is this something that you should probably call out with your foreign subrecipients rather than just sneaking it in a incorporated by reference? Yes. So this is something that you should definitely work with your subrecipients on. Can FDP help with this? I don't know. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear examples of what you're rolling out at your institutions. My initial sense is that the requirement will not vary from subrecipient to subrecipient, but maybe the language you use will. Maybe the language you use will vary from project to project, because maybe you have to spell out what access means, how that's going to work. And I just don't know if the FDP right now can provide language that's going to work just for every one of these situations. So know that the templates do account for this change and will account for the change as of January 2024, but that there's more work that needs to be done, and looking forward to working together to identifying like if and how we can generate sample language or make suggestions or be more helpful at FDP. But this by definition doesn't apply to FDP members as subrecipients. And also by definition, since you're using the foreign subaward sample, you have more flexibility as a pass-through entity to edit the sample and add the terms that work for your institution. So I hope that that's helpful. Please share samples of successful language that you find over the next year, and we will definitely revisit this at the January meeting. So I'm going to pause and take a look at the chat before we turn it over to Carrie and Beth to go through some of the template updates. So give me a second to take a look at this chat. Okay, sorry, going back to AI, yes, more specific topics than just AI. Yeah, that is a great point, Maura, thanks. Specific topics would be very, very helpful rather than just talking about the AI or AI in general. Okay, again, difficult to standardize language in the foreign subaward sample. Again, a lot of this stuff will have to defer to what you're, because if you look at this foreign subaward sample, it says we strongly advise consultation with the appropriate institutional officials to assure the subaward meets institutional sponsor and project requirements. That was already the caveat of the foreign subaward sample. So we're open to maybe creating something to help, but especially right now, I don't think we have anything right now. I would say you could add this by using one of the standard FDP subaward amendment templates, the free text version. Would be my suggestion. If you want to issue an amendment to specifically call out this policy change, you could probably issue those before January and reference the effective date. But that subaward amendment template should function if you're trying to just call out this policy change. Okay, so Stephanie, NIH did provide some sample language to include. Okay, so I was also thinking that the best that we could do at FDP is copy and paste existing language from NIH, because we don't want to run the risk of contradicting anything that NIH is saying. So anything that I would suggest would probably be very close to copying and pasting what's already out there. Okay, so thanks for providing hyperlinks in the chat. I appreciate that. Yeah, this question here about can the details of how be managed outside of the subaward. There's a lot that gets managed outside of the subaward. I think that'd be up to your institution and how specific you want to be, but I would feel like it could be appropriate in this situation to include specifics about how in an amendment or in the free text box of the additional terms section. Yeah, okay, so Mike Lauer's blog said that the agreement should indicate how the data will be shared, so there you go. Okay, again, thanks for everyone weighing in the chat here. If you haven't, there's some helpful suggestions from people aside from just me in the chat. So, okay, I think with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie and Beth to talk about some of the other adjustments that we're making to various templates and resources. So I can drive the slides, but take it away, Carrie and Beth.
Thanks, Kevin. Beth, you're going to get us started?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So these are changes that we have had submitted to the committee, reviewed as a committee, and determined to move forward on. Carrie will be providing the timeline for these updates here in a few slides. So, we also want to add a caveat here that we understand that we're on the verge of releasing these new templates, and some institutions have a more involved review and approval process for incorporating new versions. And so they might be more inclined to just hang on to the older versions, we understand, but there's always a risk when using these outdated templates as well. So, being said that, we will jump on in here. So, in the foreign fixed amount template, it's the only one where this remains, but there is an old clause about the Mexico City policy. We will be removing that. It no longer applies. Also, there is a sample force majeure language on the FDP subaward site specific to COVID. The force majeure language in general is still useful, and it's a sample, so you can edit it however you need to, but we're going to remove the specific COVID-19 pandemic reference.
And can I just say that as we go through these slides, don't think about this as just changes to the cost reimbursement subaward template. There are other resources that Beth and Carrie and their working group have been looking at and are updating. So in this case, you might be like, well, this isn't in the template, right? But it's one of the many things that the working group is looking at beyond just the template.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. I don't know if anyone else has dealt with this. This has been kind of a pain point to me, so I'm going to be getting it fixed. On the fixed rate clinical trial template, if you select the subaward amount is not to exceed, there's no text box to enter with that. It is not to exceed amount, which has been driving me nuts. So we're going to add one. And this change is for all new subaward templates. And this is something we've kind of gone back and forth on. Right now, it's set so that the final invoice deadline is not more than 60 days, the end. And usually that's fine with the federal reporting requirements. If you're the first tier subrecipient, 60 days is not a problem. However, if you are a lower tier subrecipient, or if you are issuing a sub to a lower tier subrecipient, Yale was only given 60 days. We need to be able to shorten that to our sub to Stanford so that we can get their final invoice in time. So we will be updating this, or we plan on updating this, to offer a drop down with options and add a 45-day option instead of 60. But we want to emphasize here that this is only intended for lower tier subs to shorten their final invoice timeline, not punitive or anything like that. We don't want, we just want it to be used solely for that purpose. Next slide. With the update to some of the citations in the uniform guidance, some of our citations need to be updated to templates as well. So that's just a couple of these here in debarment suspension and audit and access to records. We'll be correcting those citations so they are referring to what they're supposed to be referring to. Sorry, and that's in attachment 1. In attachment 2, we realized that the way the template is currently written is that always inserts the research terms and conditions whenever you use the templates. Not all agencies subscribe to the research terms and conditions, so we're just going to be adding a qualifier of as applicable. In the attachment 7 data transfer and use terms, specifically and only, as far as I can tell, from PII, there's an erroneous sentence that says, provider may have an obligation to make further notifications under applicable state law and shall cooperate with the provider. So that's supposed to be recipient and provider. So we'll be correcting that. And this is, again, just one of those small things that I think, will just be that much more to make our lives easier. In the new subaward templates, the select from drop down or type in is at the top, as is NIH, the most common funder. For the amendment templates, the select is at the bottom and you have to scroll up to get to the most common funders. So we're just gonna flip that so it aligns better with the new templates. All right, go ahead, Carrie.
Okay.
Or I should ask, do we have any questions so far that we should address before we move on?
You had one question in there about other use for the 45. In particular, the example was if you have a subrecipient that has trouble getting their invoices in on time, could you use it in that scenario? And I think that is one of the things we would discourage use of. We really want to focus it on providing an option for the lower tier subs. And we're going to update guidance around that as well, so that each of the member institutions and anyone else using the templates has a guide of where that is intended to be used. So anyway.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that's a great question. And thanks for pointing that out, because we will have to clarify that as we talk about issues with invoicing. There's is that an issue with the terms and conditions in the 60-day timeline, or is that an issue with complying with the terms? So we kind of, as we talked about this in the past, we're it's complying with the terms. It's not the 60 days that's the problem, because you could almost put any amount of days and it could still be an issue if there's something else going on. But I think it's a good question, but I agree with what Carrie just said right there.
Absolutely. And I think that Kevin, you makes it an outstanding point where in a situation like that, I would recommend employing advance warning notices, coordinating with them more closely, making sure that there's open communication, again, to address the compliance with the contract rather than the contract itself. That's an excellent point. Okay. All right, so this one regarding Edison, and this one came up rather recently, and so I am not sure all of the templates that it affects, but I know for certain it is in the new subaward template. And so anywhere that this appears, we will address this. It was brought to our attention that when you select the agency, the reference to Edison does not change. And specifically, we noticed NASA, while that automatically incorporates Edison, NASA, for example, does not use Edison. So they use ENTR for their invention reporting system. And so what we would like to do here, which is also why we are shamelessly requesting help from PDF experts, is we would like to change the conditional formatting on this. So when NASA's brought down, the appropriate reference to their system appears. And then in the case of other agency, drop down and then adding your agency in, that would have a more generic language option in the back, whether that be referencing Edison or other, or portal as determined by a prime sponsor, or whatever information that needs to relay. And we're working out what that will look like. But we do recognize this is kind of a very important update that we need to make sure is included in this round of updates. So that is that one. So on the timeline itself, we are going to have the template drafts, updraft updates available for comment. Our target date is December 1st, and having those up for about 30 days to get comment back. Still trying to hit that January 2024 deadline to have those templates on the website ready to use for membership and everyone else. So that is the timeline that we're looking for. We also are trying to leave ourselves a little bit of time to be responsive to any potential updates for our hot topic items here, the DMS pilot project, and for the NIH notice regarding lab notebooks. I think the chat has highlighted, and the NIH session yesterday highlighted, there's still a lot of questions out there. So the more robust the FAQs get, we may have more information about how to better use the existing template, or also how to, if we need to address that with a specific language. All right. And I think it's also good to point out here that we get a lot of information and requests from various members and others through the email. And so we get questions about larger projects, and we get questions about how to use the templates. We get questions about maybe historical conversations regarding why the templates are the way they are. And so we welcome all of that feedback, and we try to address that with every thing that comes in. We try to acknowledge that and provide updates to you, even if it doesn't result in a change to the template. So if anyone is missing feedback or response from us, please do not hesitate to reach out to Beth and myself. So the bigger projects that have come up multiple times for us are the option of having another clinical trial template, or a variation of the one that we have for NIH that allows for hybrid billing. So there are some cases in which a clinical trial comes in and there's a cost reimbursable portion, and then there is the per patient fixed rate portion. And so if you use the clinical trial template, then with the fixed rate, then you have to carve out the piece that's cost reimbursable, and vice versa if you use the cost reimbursable template. So just having an option for that. And we've also, Beth, do you mind? Thank you. Pick up on the next one.
Yes. So we're also aware that there are clinical trials outside of NIH. So, or sponsors that offer them outside of NIH. So we're working on possibly doing, NIH will have their own and then one for everything else. And something that it's kind of just continue to take a look at is the use of the unilateral templates and kind of that balance between the reduced administrative burden, a no cost extension your next year of funding, versus, what about a subaward number change? Is that something that should or shouldn't be used for unilateral? So ongoing review and discussion with associated guidance on that as well.
Thank you, Beth. And there's an ongoing larger conversation. Yes, and I apologize to everyone for my dogs. I sincerely apologize. They wait until the least opportune moment, So we're going to, we get a lot of questions around unilateral amendments and how those work and what they pertain to. And so we are just dedicated to continuing that conversation. We're very excited to bring all of these items and particularly discussion about what may be needed around unilateral amendments in the guidance or definitions of those items, or focused FAQs with the larger Subawards Subcommittee that is being put together right now. And so we're very excited about these continued topics. Please, again, I want to put out there that we welcome any suggestions. Most of what we're getting surrounding the unilateral is just confusion about what they can be used for and the timelines around issuing those. And some institutions really like them and some institutions are a little hesitant to use them. So again, it's an optional item. It is something that you can agree to in the original subaward agreement, but just some clarity may help those who are a little bit uncertain about using them moving forward. So, and let me think if there is something else here. I think that is it, Kevin, on this one. Thank you. So we also wanted to provide guidance around how to use the current template to include a DSM plan. So Kevin mentioned earlier about the ongoing pilot and how that work is going. And so the biggest question templates gets related to this is how to use the current template. So again, the template is in compliance, but if you would like to include your plan in the subaward, which is a recommendation, so you would run the template for NIH, and then when you get to the data sharing piece, you can select attached in the drop-down menu and then include the DSM plan in attachment 6 documents section, so that is included in that packet and that the template is showing that it's referenced and then incorporated that way. So in attachment 6 documents. Any question on that at this time? Can't really speak to, the ongoing conversations about NIH's requirements in this area until we get additional guidance from them, but this is how you can incorporate at this time. Okay, do we have any other questions we need to grab in there, Beth?
There were a few people who wanted to make additional suggestions for changes. And for that, I would say there is a form on the website that kind of guides you through all the information we need in order to consider a request. So please, you don't have to wait until we are doing our usual cycle of updates. Please feel free to submit one of those at any time.
Yes, correct. And that's an excellent point, Beth, that we continue to meet even in the interim times between the template update seasons, I guess, so to speak. And so we can field those questions and add things to our list for discussion with the working group and with the soon to be larger subcommittee group as well. So please submit those. And if you have questions about usage of templates or anything like that, or clarification is needed regarding guidance or anything like that, you can email us general questions at the Subawards email or to Beth and I directly. If you email us both at the same time, then we can get back to you quicker in case one of us is in a place where they can't respond. Just throwing that out there. But if it's a template update request, please use the form. That form gathers all of the information that we need to be able to address that and bring it to committee for discussion. Thank you. Kevin? Yeah,
let me try and add a couple things.
Okay.
Thanks again, people in the chat. There's also some helpful information that we'll take a look at after the meeting here, like commenting on some of these slides. That's why it's good to always have a broader group of people taking a look at things and making sure that that we're heading in the right direction. But let me see. There's a couple things that there were one or two things in the chat, and then I wanted to just add some notes and then turn it over to Stephanie for the website. Speaking of the website, as we put stuff over there and making changes to the template, we want maybe pay a little bit closer attention to version control, footers, labeling everything and making it crystal clear what changes. So if there's a typo that we change like off cycle from the normal like 2-year update process, one example is adding the UEI number instead of DUNS to attachment 3B. It's like, okay, so then we updated that in April of 2022, but we didn't really update anything other than just add the UEI number. So we want to clarify that like there is no like April 2022 version. It's just in April 2022 we updated the UEI. So it's just a quick example there. There's a really good question in here about so we are not making any changes to the templates to address the NIH policy change to 15.2. We're not making any changes, but there's a really good question here. If the templates are already built in compliance and incorporate by reference the whole GPS, why do we need to amend the foreign sub-agreements in the first place? Now, I get that, but I feel like the foreign sub-recipients know this is coming. They were signing off in masse in letters to NIH. At least one of the letters from European institutions was forwarded to the Subawards inbox where they outlined, their thoughts on it. So they know that it's coming. And I just feel like I would recommend erring on the side of being as transparent as possible. Like, do you have to issue like amendment number 1 and write in text in the free text box to reference this policy change? Or can you provide notice to the authorized official of your subrecipient organization via email or some other way? I think that's a good question, but I don't know. It'd be hard to gather everyone's thoughts right now, but like, would your institution be comfortable with that approach, or would your institution be much more likely to just issue amendments to get in compliance, even if it means trying to make sure that your subrecipient organizations are fully aware of the change and that they can help you be in compliance? So I don't know. I just feel like we're going to see a lot of amendments rather than just kind of letting it go.
I would agree, Kevin, just based on the language in the notice itself, that NIH expects amendments to be issued, and that if they cannot or will not agree, that there's an implication for the overall subaward. So I think that given the drive behind this, that there's a very strong request from NIH for amendments on this.
Yeah, but that
great question.
Still, yeah, that good question, and I'm hoping we can get more information from NIH on exceptions to the 60-day. I know that they're probably not going to want to field an exception from every single recipient for every single one of their foreign subawards, but I don't know, maybe a little bit more guidance on how that process works. There was also, if we can follow up individually if we don't get to these specific questions. Apologies if we can't address your specific question right now. I do want to give Stephanie some time here in the next minute. One quick note on the approval process for these changes that Beth and Carrie are making. That they and their working group are doing the hard work, and they're making judgment calls along the way. And the way this works is like, we don't like vote on this, and we don't like, you know, like approval is more like this, if we make the process as transparent as possible, and we consider all comments in good faith, and we make changes that are make sense given uniform guidance and federal awarding agency policies, like that's the approval. And there's always going to be some objections or some questions. That's why we have our FAQs and guidance, so we can use that document to answer questions that you feel may be unanswered with any of these template changes. But we'll be as transparent as possible about what we mean with like approval here. And we'll accompany these changes with instruction documents and maybe a training webinar separate from one of these FDP meetings, so we can teach people about not just these changes, but the templates in general, because we do field a lot of questions that have to do with lack of awareness or user error. Absolutely no judgment on that, absolutely no judgment, but like we do receive those questions, so a training webinar could help. And I think that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to Stephanie to talk about the website.
Thank you, Kevin. And I just want to also share my deep appreciation for everything that you guys are doing. Is Amanda Humphrey there? I see her. Because I'm going to be talking about some significant changes with the website, I'm going to unmute you, Amanda, and when you're ready to talk, you can, you could talk, because I'm going to be talking about, you're going to get a sneak peek today of what I'm going to be talking about a little bit more in depth tomorrow. But I really wanted to focus directly on how the website changes may or may not impact you. I think you'll be very happy with the new design. And also the reason why I asked Amanda to unmute is because I also want to touch very briefly about the financial conflict of interest clearinghouse that's been around on our website for many, many years, and some of the short-term and longer-term plans for that clearinghouse. And in fact, during this meeting, Amanda sent out on the Subawards listserv a notice, so you should check that out, about what to expect when we launch the new website on Monday. I can't believe it. With the financial conflict of interest clearinghouse. So I am going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Here we are. So this is, obviously not the new website. This is our current, soon to be old archive site. And as you can see, here's the design. I know that you guys are used to accessing your subaward forms, or maybe you're not. Maybe you go and access them all kinds of myriad of ways. Maybe you have it bookmarked. Maybe you go right here to the ugly black bar. So no more black bar. And you can see my screen, right? Great. So I'm now going to show you the new website. Ta-da! This is our homepage. I did show brief glimpse of this at the last meeting. We've actually got some pictures up. You may have remembered there was a photographer going around, so we have some pictures up on the new website to highlight, all our wonderful collaborations with each other. To go back to the old website for a moment, and I go to subaward forms, one key thing I want to highlight here is that this particular URL is going to change. We do have it set up that it is going to redirect automatically to the new URL for the subaward. And we're not even calling this page subaward forms anymore. We're calling it subaward templates and tools. It should automatically redirect if you bookmark the page, but if for whatever reason you need to have that URL, you should note it. I also want to make the recommendation that, you know, anything's possible when you go through this a major change like this with a website. We're also switching servers. We're going from one server to another. We're redirecting all these links. I would highly recommend before the end of the business day on Friday of this week, if there's anything critical that you access by going directly to our website, whether that's a subaward template, whether that's a data use, a data transfer and use agreement template, a DTUA, anything that you access on a day-to-day basis, download it now. Just download it before the end of the business day on Friday. We have backups of everything. I'm not afraid of losing anything. It's just that come Monday morning, I'm hoping that everything goes according to plan, and it should. But that is one thing that I would recommend, just as a precautionary tale. So as you can see in our current design, you know, it's not exactly easy on the eyes. It's not always hard to find everything. So let me show you what the new Subawards templates and tools will look like. And you can access it various different ways. Because it is like one of our highly successful ongoing demonstrations, we have what's here, a new demonstration section where you will find some of the most frequently used demonstrations, resources, significant activities going on at the FDP, including the NIH Data Management Sharing Pilot, for example. And so here we have Subaward templates and tools. I'm going to click on here. And here comes the unveiling. We have here a little preamble about what this is, who to contact, our little disclaimer. And so here we go. We now have tabs that are categorized into various sections. We have templates. We have subawards to foreign non-US organizations. We have subcontracts, our samples. We have the clinical research subawards, where we're talking about that fixed rate clinical research subaward and the customizable attachment 2B. And so you can see here, we put attachment 7 under other optional attachments because you never know what else may come up in the future. And what's nice about our new website is that certainly this can grow over time if we need it to. It's easier to get what you need. I think it's easier to find what you need. Again, something that I want to point out to you that I think is very important in terms, again, of URLs. So for example, I'll just show cost reimbursement template. This URL, oh, and by the way, I know you're looking here like, what is this? It's everything. The FDP.org is going to be the same, right? What you're looking right here at right now is a temporary server where we're housing everything. So the website isn't exactly live. It's just temporary where we're building our website. So this isn't going to be the URL. But what you should know when it says the FDP.org, it's /WB content, blah, blah, blah. The URLs for all of these templates are going to change as well. And so I just wanted to make sure in the chat, or if anyone has anything to say, that this doesn't impact you, or that someone didn't come up with some automated feed using with these URLs. I don't think so, but I just wanted to make sure no one had any issues with regards to changing URLs. That's my overall question. And thank you, Jamie, for jumping in. Yeah, the work of the website has been a true collaboration. It's the website working group within the communications committee between Jamie Sprague from Cornell, myself, and Sarah Peterzak from FDP. The three of us have been doing the groundwork. Doesn't sound like anyone has any issues with URLs. Okay, great. Same here. I also wanted to point out that transfer and use agreements, they finally have their own part of the website as well. And I know I have to give Amanda a couple of minutes to talk. You'll see this looks a little different. I'm still working on it. The design is a little bit different. We may keep it, we may change it, I don't know. But again, we're putting things into buckets so that's more easily found. So I'm happy, of course, to hear your suggestions, your thoughts. You could write to website@thefdp.org if you have any questions or concerns. Now let's talk about the FCOI clearinghouse. Just so you know that, like I said, that's been around for years. If you remember the PHS policy that came out, I believe that initially came out of August 2012. Everyone has that date ingrained in their brain. And then the FDP came up with a demonstration and this wonderful resource for everyone to use. And let me just go here, financial conflict of interest. And list of compliant entities. You'll see it's going to go back to the old website. And so before I just mention it, to have Amanda take over, representing as co-chair of the Conflict of Interest Subcommittee, to speak on behalf of this, the only thing I'll mention is that when you do access our new website, this is the part that's not going to look modernized. It's going to take you to our old, I'll call, archive site. And so, which will also have a new URL. And I did send an announcement out last week, as well as yesterday, to the Subawards listserv, kind of giving you guys the heads up. So Amanda, take it away.
Yeah. So when...
Ooh, I can't hear you.
Would help if I put this
Perfect.
Down. Sorry. Okay, so when the question of moving the website came up, we were like, great, this is a fantastic time to do something that we wanted to do for a while, which is to update the FCOI clearinghouse. And there are a couple of things that we're going to do long term that I can give you all a brief overview of. I think that the primary thing for right now for institutions to understand is that, as Stephanie said, the URL will be transitioning on Monday. And when you saw Stephanie navigating the new website, basically 2 down from the new subaward templates and tools site, you will still see financial conflict of interest FCOI clearinghouse. Now you may be asking yourself, we have the expanded clearinghouse. Why do I care about just this FCOI clearinghouse? It's so narrow and it only answers one question that I have. Well, the expanded clearinghouse is required for FDP members, and then we've been accepting cohorts of other institutions to come into the expanded clearinghouse. And as you know, it covers a broad range of institutional information, which we have a wonderful committee of people that in the expanded clearinghouse, who I'm very grateful to for vetting a lot of that information. And so it's much more expansive, and institutions pay to be part of the expanded clearinghouse because their information is vetted. There's a system reminder to remind them of when things need to be reviewed and revised. And so all of those things happen separately. And then for other institutions where it's not worth it to be in the expanded clearinghouse, they still want to let us know they have an FCOI compliant policy. And so that's why this is still important. And it's actually one of the most visited websites, pages on our website. So we want to keep it alive. So I have 36 seconds. So the main message I want you all to take away is just, for today, the first thing that is going to happen is that we are going to keep this as an archive. It will still be available. The second longer term will be that we are going to make some changes to update and make this a little bit easier to use and navigate, and make the data a little bit more perhaps reliable or consistent. And so those more information about that will be forthcoming.
Thank you.
Amanda, you did a great job summarizing that in 36 seconds.
I got the most important stuff in there, so that's all that matters. And people can come to COI if they want more, but they're all going to go to expanded clearinghouse. It'll be fun. All right. Great.
I guess we were all brought back to the main room.
Yeah, in
conclusion,
like I was recording the session, so I hope that when we end this, like, the recording saves to my folder like it's done for previous Zoom recordings, but I just don't know if the breakout room main session affects that. But yeah, that's it for us. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, everyone, for coming.
I hope I gave you enough time, Amanda. Okay. You know me, I tend to talk.